Hi, good afternoon. It's Mark from Blue Poodle Studio, and today we're here to talk a little bit about the business of licensing and consumer products in the world of entertainment. So first I wanted to show you, this is a reproduction of a classic photo of Walt, of course, surrounded by, the beloved plush of Mickey Mouse. And what I like about this photo, besides it's a fun composition with all the Mickeys around around Walt, it's also a foreshadowing of the scope and size of consumer products licensing in the entertainment industry. So that is a business, really, I believe, that essentially Walt started. And he had had some earlier efforts into merchandising, but in 1932, a man named Kay Kamen from an advertising and marketing agency in Kansas City managed to get a hold of Walt and got an appointment to meet with him. And so he took the train from Kansas City to Los Angeles and had a meeting at the Disney Studios, early Disney Studios, with Walt and his brother Roy. And this was in advance of the release of Snow White, and the firm was doing quite well, but still struggling a little bit to make their payroll and keep their expenses going. And apparently Kay had an idea that he was going to help them really launch and reinvent the use of their characters in toy product manufacturing. And he said he would split it with them 50-50, and they'd had some other deals that weren't so great before, and they basically shook hands with Kay and said, let's get going. And so this gentleman helped basically invent, I believe, the licensing industry in many ways, and certainly started it at the Walt Disney Company. Their offices were in New York, and he had a team of people that were actively then promoting and developing art and characters and standards. And we'll talk later about style guides and licensing materials, but essentially licensing is the business of renting an intellectual property asset to a company or a manufacturer for them to put on their products or services, and then they're paying you a fee or a percentage or what's sometimes known as a royalty on the sales of those goods. And of course the contracts involve minimums and guarantees, and of course lots of legal and creative approvals of everything. And so when Kay Carmen built this division, it was originally called Walt Disney Productions Merchandising Division, different than today's version of Disney Consumer Products. And so I had the opportunity in my career early on to be a licensor. I worked for the Mead Corporation in their school and office products division, and Mead was a long-time licensor of Disney products, Disney properties from the Walt Disney Company. And so I had a chance to work on them, and at a later date I'll show you some of the materials that I developed with them in the late 80s, early 90s. But more importantly, there was this massive archive at Mead of old correspondence and materials from the earliest days of licensing from Disney. And in this case, Mead was a long-standing licensor because they made school tablets and school supplies, and you can see probably a few of those images and materials in here. But part of the process then of licensing is, of course, to market upcoming films or properties to the manufacturers. And how is that done? Well, it's certainly done through meetings and sales calls. Here's a couple of examples. This is from 1995 when I was at the Disney store, and these are postcards that came from Disney licensing and went out to manufacturers telling them about this exciting yet unknown film called A Toy Story. And on the back it says, "This November, Disney presents the entirely first computer-generated animated film. Using cutting-edge technology to tell an unforgettable story, Toy Story follows the tradition of great Disney films." Then they go on to talk about the multi-million-dollar marketing campaign, including theme parks, promotional partners with Burger King and Nestle. And so these are the kinds of licensing materials or collateral that are used to attract and inform companies that they work with or prospective companies about these upcoming films or entertainment venues that the manufacturer may want to license and take advantage of. But I found again in the archive some fascinating older stuff that ties directly back to Kay Carmen in those early days. So let's take a look at some materials related to Peter Pan. Now we're going to take a look at some collateral materials that came from Disney in the early days of their licensing operation to the Mead Corporation. In this instance, the letter went to the precursor of Mead, a company called WestTab, stood for Western Tablet and Stationery, and they were a company bought by Mead to help them to get into consumer products. The gentleman is addressed to is a guy named Bryant Crutchfield, who I had met during my days working at Mead. And it says, "Dear Mr. Crutchfield, we were re-releasing Walt Disney's Peter Pan in June of 1969. It will be given all the promotion and exploitation values that a new picture would receive. All of this will be the first time to be shown since 1960, and a proven good merchandising picture. The addition of Walt Disney's Peter Pan item to your Disney line for next year will certainly produce business plus better." So, and it's signed by a gentleman named Louis Lispy, or Lou Lispy. Lou was an art director who joined the company with Kay Carmen and is responsible for a great number of the classic Disney art character art that was done in the early days. So besides this cover letter, there was also this flyer, which was used to promote the film for Peter Pan, a beautiful color illustration, and this is again dated in the late 1960s. And then finally, here's a black and white publicity still that was also released at that same time. So again, this was in a packet of materials that I found from 1968 in the Mead archives from Vintage Disney Walt Disney Productions. All right, so what happens? Obviously, we take a look at the marketing materials for Peter Pan that came out. Many companies sign up and take advantage, but it isn't always the case because, of course, each company has to decide what's best for their business. So that letter was written on August 28th, 1968, and here is an internal memo from West Tab, the precursor of the Mead Corporation School and Office Products Division, with an internal analysis of this proposal. And this is again from Bryant Crutchfield to the VP at that time, the marketing VP. It says, "Dear Al, I just received the attached letter from Lou Lispy of Walt Disney Productions. I have strained my imagination and can't come up with any exciting way for us to tie in with the re-release of Peter Pan. I just don't believe that we can create enough excitement with either our buyers or consumers for them to purchase regular pencil tablets at midsummer, which is the time this is occurring, versus the fall, which is back to school. In fact, I don't believe we can promote Disney items other than as a part of our back-to-school product line like we are currently doing. If we could tie it in with a crayon item or something else, I believe, giving more thought to this, we are literally wasting our time trying to promote tie-ins with Walt Disney outside of the back-to-school season. The pencil tablet is primarily sold at that time in volume and slows down as a year-round item. In my opinion, we would not justify extra promotional expenditures. Do you have any other ideas or comments or suggestions? If so, I would certainly like to hear them." And again, what I love is this is written typed on mimeograph paper with an actual typewriter. And then the VP, Al Coast, replies, "Dear Bryant, I have been over the Peter Pan re-release per your suggestions, and I agree with you 100%. I do not think it is worth much for us. We will file it." So again, there's a certain formal tone to the communications from that day, and this came about a month later in late September. So, at any rate, it's fun to see all this great old communications, and there's more to review and more to look at over time. But that's my story for today. Thanks for visiting, and we'll catch you a little bit later. Bye-bye. And I want to remind you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Blue Poodle Studio. Thanks.